Hey, everybody. You know me. My name is Katie Williams. I work at JadeTrack, and we're so excited to be hosting our first virtual happy hour. Our goal with this happy hour is to create a space for folks who work within sustainability or maybe don't work in sustainability, maybe just champion sustainability within their organizations, to create a space to share best practices and then also to do some networking. So we're very excited to have Sean Reynolds of the City of Ann Arbor today presenting on his work with tree planting and resilience. So he'll be giving our introduction talk today. That will be for about the first 15 minutes-ish. And then after that, we're going to be throwing you into virtual breakout rooms so that you can meet and greet one another. So Sean will share some guiding questions at the end of his chat. You're welcome to talk about tree planting at your organization, resilience, or you can just go off script and talk about whatever sustainability project is the most pressing for you or you're the most passionate about. So any questions before we get started today? Real quick, this event is sponsored by JadeTrack, and we help organizations pull together all the data that they would need for energy and sustainability reporting. So if you'd like to learn more, go to jadetrack.com. And we work with ambitious organizations who are on a mission to work towards that triple bottom line of people, planet, and profit by reducing energy spend. And I'm going to hand it over to Sean.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. All right, so as Katie mentioned, my name is Sean Reynolds. I do work for the City of Ann Arbor. I'm a Community Sustainability Coordinator here in our Office of Sustainability and Innovations. So before I get into my talk, just wanted to give a little bit of background on what we do here at OSI, which is our abbreviation for Office of Sustainability and Innovations. Here in Ann Arbor, we do have our A20 plan. You can see the logo for that up in the top right corner of the screen. That is our very ambitious plan to achieve a just and equitable transition to community-wide carbon neutrality by the year 2030. So we have a whole bunch of different strategies that we have outlined in that plan to achieve carbon neutrality. Those include switching our electric grid over to 100% renewable energy, switching over our appliances and vehicles from gas burning to electric, improving energy efficiency of the buildings here in the city, reducing the miles that we travel in our gas burning vehicles, reducing waste, changing the way that we use, reuse, and dispose of materials, and then also increasing the resilience of our city, of our community, and of the folks who live here. So I'm going to be talking today about just one small piece of that plan, and that is our work on planting trees here in the city on private property through what we call the 10,000 Trees Initiative. In an effort to increase the community's resilience and how those trees can actually do that. Before we get into that, though, I did want to spend a little bit of time just talking about my journey, how I got here. I think it's important kind of context for what we're going to be talking about. And I know we have some sustainability professionals on here, but I think we might have a few students possibly also. So just in case they're on the line, give them an idea of how I got into this position and my career path through sustainability. So we'll start off with this lovely picture of the Great Smoky Mountains. You may have seen this behind Katie earlier also. So just wanted to start off with how I got interested in nature and the environment to begin with. And this is really because my family loves to travel. Every summer vacation, every Christmas, instead of getting presents, my brother and I's present would be that we'd be going on a road trip somewhere new. So we would travel all over the country, usually kind of planning our trips around national parks. This particular one is Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It is my favorite national park. And so much so that, in fact, when I was like 8 or 9 years old, I think is the first time we went there with my family. And at the end of our 4 or 5 days that we were there, I was crying because I did not want to leave the national park. Most kids cry when they don't want to leave a playground or an amusement park. I cried when I didn't want to leave a national park. So really just shows where I got that love for nature and the environment. So after, or when I went off to undergrad college, I went to a small school near Baltimore, Maryland, called Stevenson University. Went there, studied general biology because I knew that I was interested in that area of study. When I graduated, I thought I narrowed it down to two different career paths. I wanted to do some sort of animal behavior or ecology research, either focusing on birds or smaller mammals. But life doesn't always take you where you think it will. And my first job out of college was actually working down in the rainforest in Puerto Rico with this lovely group of people here. And our job was to go out into the rainforest pretty much every day, and we would just go to a different plot of the forest and map the trees there, identify them, and measure them. It was part of a long-term study kind of showing how the rainforest changes over time. So comparing the plots when we went out there to what they looked like 5 years before us when the last time someone had gone out. And really just doing that job, fell in love with trees. I'd never really focused on trees before, but just learning how to identify them and looking at the leaves and the bark and the general shape of the tree and all of that to figure out what they are. I fell in love with trees. So once that job ended, I moved from the jungle to the concrete jungle, as it were, and I started working for a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. Called Casey Trees. This is a really great nonprofit there that does a lot of work on planting trees, doing tree advocacy, tree engagement, all kinds of anything tree related. And so I did a lot of things through that job. But one of my favorite things actually was we did volunteer tree inventories of all of the parks in the city. So the city and Casey Trees were partnering to get an idea of every single tree that was in the public park system there. Which is obviously very ambitious. So we needed to use volunteers to help us with that. And so we would go out and we would teach the volunteers, here's how to identify different trees. We would go around, show them this is an oak, this is a cherry, whatever. And then they would help us measure the trees. And I really fell in love with that kind of engagement side of things and talking to people about trees, teaching people about trees. Really realized that that was something I was really excited about and passionate about. But I was still also interested in the research side of things. So I went down to Auburn University out in the pine ecosystem, which is a very rare and endangered ecosystem down in our southeast part of our country. It's a beautiful kind of like open savanna. It almost looks like you're in Africa sometimes. Ecosystem with these pine trees, but there's little oaks that grow in there. So I was doing research on their physiology, measuring their photosynthesis rates, all that kind of stuff. Really enjoyed the research part of things, but realized that every other part of academia was not for me. So decided to pursue that path of community engagement and education related to trees. So I found a job posting for so they were looking for someone to run the 10,000 Trees Initiative here in Ann Arbor as part of the 820 plan. I applied for it, got the job. Since then have moved into a new position with the city where I'm still running the 10,000 Trees Initiative, but now have branched out, pun intended, into several other projects, doing air quality monitoring, sustainable food, fertilizer regulations, all kinds of fun stuff. So really I've been enjoying this job and getting to learn more about sustainability. And it all started with trees. So let's talk about trees for a little while. So how do trees improve resilience? The main kind of part of this talk. Well, there's a lot of different ways, actually. So for one thing, the canopy of a tree can help to shade buildings, which actually reduces the cooling costs and the amount of energy that you have to use to cool a building, just by having that shade over the roof, preventing that radiant energy from the sun from hitting the roof and heating up the building in those hotter summer months. On the other side of that, the canopy also actually helps in the winter months, especially with evergreen conifer species, because they still have their foliage on and they're very dense. They serve really as really good windbreaks, so they can actually help to stop really cold, piercing winds from hitting buildings in those winter months, which can help to reduce the amount of energy and the costs that go into heating your building during those months. Looking at the leaves and the roots, those are good at absorbing pollutants, both from the air and from the soil and the water also. So really helping to remove pollutants from our environment. Roots are also really great at reducing erosion. They really are able to hold onto soil and prevent the soil around them from eroding as much. And they're also great at helping to mitigate flooding and stormwater runoff. That's just through the ability of trees to take up a lot of water. And so when there is excess water, trees are able to take that up and help prevent the water from building up as much as it would if there weren't trees there. The trunks, really the whole tree, but the trunks are where most of this happens, they're good at sequestering carbon. So obviously that is very important for our carbon neutrality goals. If we plant more trees, then we're going to be able to store more carbon in those trees, which would otherwise be out in the environment in some other form, whether that's carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, what have you. So really important for our carbon neutrality goals also. And then finally, trees are pretty. They look nice, they're beautiful. People enjoy being around them. They have actually been shown to help improve mental health. Obviously, if you're like a school kid sitting in a classroom that doesn't have windows, you're probably going to not be having as good of a time as if you're in a classroom that has windows looking out into nice treed area. And that applies to office workers too, and really anyone. And they also add habitat for wildlife. So we can see there are a lot of different benefits that are provided by trees, all of which are going to help to increase the resilience in the city as we are facing climate change. We are here in Michigan, we are seeing warming temperatures and then also more intense rainfall, more intense storms. So really the shade from the canopy is important here, but also the flooding mitigation and the runoff mitigation are really important here. And especially in a city, you often have, in cities, you always have an urban heat island effect, which is basically within a city, the temperature is usually 2, maybe 3 degrees warmer than it is in the surrounding more rural areas, just because of all of the concrete and glass and asphalt and all of that other man-made material that is here that absorbs the heat from the sun. So putting in trees is really important way of mitigating that heat and making the city more resilient. So just another way of looking at this, this is data from the tree benefits calculator. You can see the link to there down here at the bottom. I really recommend if you're interested in the topic, going there and just playing around with this. All you do is put in a species of tree and then the diameter of the trunk. So you can take an actual tree, measure the diameter and put it in, or you can just put in random ones. Excuse me. This example is a northern red oak, which is a relatively medium-sized one, about 8 inches in diameter. So let's see what the monetary benefits are. So you can see down there at the bottom, it's almost $93 per year. But if we break that out into the different benefits that I was talking about earlier, it's about 72 cents per year in the reductions in atmospheric carbon dioxide. About $6 per year through improvements in air quality. Around $7 per year in mitigating stormwater runoff, about $37 to $38 per year through reductions in energy usage through that shading and that wind break effect. And then more than $41 per year just in increases in property value through the fact that trees look nice and they do a lot of great things for your yard. I do really want to focus on equity in this talk also. That is a really big part of the A20 plan. Every single strategy that we have outlined throughout all of it, equity and justice are really central. And it's definitely trees are definitely no exception. So this is actually a screenshot from another really cool tool that's put out by American Forests called the Tree Equity Score tool. There are other tools that look at this also. But basically the bottom line here is that the benefits that trees provide that we were just talking about are often missing in the areas where they're most needed. So if you have an area that is low in tree canopy cover, obviously we want to help increase the tree canopy cover by planting trees there. But we also want to be planting trees there to provide all those benefits that we were just talking about. And in the neighborhoods that have lower tree canopy cover, you often see that those are also the neighborhoods that are most in need of those benefits. They're neighborhoods that have higher rates of lung diseases and things that can be caused by bad air pollution. They're neighborhoods that have higher populations of children, of elderly people, of people of color, all of whom are at extra risk of some of these negative health effects and are disproportionately affected by the climate change effects that we were seeing, that heat, that excessive flooding, all of those things. So we really need to be putting trees in to these areas, not only to increase their tree canopy, but also to help these neighborhoods through planting these trees that provide these different benefits. And that kind of leads us into the next thing I want to talk about, which is right tree, right place. So this is kind of an adage that is out there in the forestry world. It's a really important thing to follow because just planting trees is not going to solve climate change. I think everyone probably knows that. But it is one of the main things that folks do in an attempt to help with climate change. But you really have to do it in the right way, because if you do it in the wrong way, then it's not going to make things better, and it can actually make things worse in some situations. So you really have to be careful with how you're planting trees and making sure that they're going into the right place. So some things to think about when you're doing that, conflicts with solar panels. You don't want to put a tree in where it is preventing current or even future solar panel installations from getting that radiant energy from the sun that they need to provide us with renewable energy, which is another really important thing for mitigating climate change, is switching over to renewable energies like solar. You want to consider conflicts with humans. So if you have somebody who, for whatever reason, really does not want a tree in their yard, you don't want to plant a tree in their yard, because if they're against it from the beginning, then they're not going to take care of that tree, and it is very likely not to survive. You want to consider conflicts with infrastructure. So this is things like not planting a tree that's going to get to 60, 70 feet tall underneath of a power line. Or planting a tree that's going to get 30, 40 feet wide, only 10 feet away from the edge of your house. Things like that. So you want to make sure that the tree is going to have the room that it needs to grow without causing issues with the built environment that is around it. You also want to consider conflicts with other trees. So trees obviously are dependent on the resources that they can get from the soil, and also light resource. And so if you're planting a whole bunch of trees too close together, then the vast majority of them probably won't survive because there's just not enough resources for them. There are also species that directly compete with other plants. So an example of this is the black walnut tree, Juglans nigra is the Latin name. That tree actually produces a compound in its roots called juglone, that it then releases into the soil around the root system, and that's toxic to a lot of other plant species, including some other trees. So you really need to think about the trees that you're planting in and make sure that you're not going to have conflicts between them. Again, you want to focus on equity, make sure that you're meeting the needs of a particular community where you're putting in trees. So if you have an area that floods frequently, you're going to need to put in different trees than an area that is experiencing heat island effects really drastically. You also want to think about native ecosystems. So this one gets a little tricky because when you're talking about a city, obviously the land that was there before the city was put in, there is a native ecosystem for that land. But now that the city has been put in and it's existed for hundreds of years at this point, in most cases, there's really nothing that's actually native to a city when you're thinking about the ecosystem. But that doesn't mean that you can go around planting whatever species. You still need to plant species that will do well in that ecosystem. And you really want to focus on ones that were native to the ecosystem that existed beforehand, or ones that are maybe not native there, but are native to areas nearby, as the species range is shifting into the area that you are in now. So this is actually because of climate change, a lot of tree species are moving in where their native range is, where they best grow, because of warming temperatures and things like that. And so you might be planting species that are not originally native to the area, but are becoming native or naturalized into the area. So native or species or non-native, non-invasive, that's a very key point, species that are adaptive to the environment. You also want to think about species diversity. So you don't want to be going in and planting all maples, for example. Or as another example, all ash trees, which is what happened here in Ann Arbor and a lot of other places. We had a vast number of trees in our canopy that were ash trees, then emerald ash borer, which is an insect that burrows into the trunk of the tree to lay its eggs, and then the larvae hatch and they move around and create little zigzag tunnels in the cambium or the inner part of the tree that where the water and the nutrients flow up and down through the xylem and phloem. And can kill the tree off because of their tunneling through that area, cutting off that resource flow through the tree. There are a lot of other examples of this. Chestnut blight killed off most of the American chestnuts. Dutch elm disease killed off a lot of American elms. So we've seen this time and time again where something comes in that's not native to here that kills off a population of a specific species or group of species. And if your canopy consists mostly of that species, then you're going to lose a lot of trees at once. So the more diverse your canopy is, the better chance your canopy has of withstanding things like this coming through, and having other species that will survive. Also thinking about the species needs. So again, you don't want to plant a tree that needs a lot of water in a particularly dry, sandy soil area, and vice versa. And then also really thinking about after planting. So you can't just plant a tree and then expect it to grow up and provide all those benefits without doing anything after you plant it. You really have to think about the fact that you're going to need to care for this tree. You're going to need to water this tree. You're going to need to prune this tree when it has a diseased branch maybe, or when it is getting too close to a power line or other infrastructure. There's a lot of care and maintenance considerations that need to go into it when you're planting a tree. So to expand on that a little bit, one thing that is also really important when you're doing a tree planting program is really engaging with people and getting people to engage with trees. The more engaged they are, the more likely they are to take care of those trees and make sure that they survive and thrive and provide all the benefits that we want them to. So one part of this is education. So an example, we provide these tree information cards that you see here. With every tree that we give out through our free tree giveaways or that we plant on someone's property through our community tree planting events, they get a tree information card for that specific species. So it gives them information, general information about the tree. It gives them fun facts about the tree. And it also tells them how to plant the tree and how to care for their tree. So this is a really important step in educating folks about the trees that they have. You also want to plan with folks. So when we do our community tree planting events, we get folks who are interested in getting trees. I go and I do a site visit with each and every one of them and figure out what their yard looks like, what kinds of species can go there, what kinds of needs they have. So as an example, this is these folks had in this back corner of their backyard, it frequently flooded. And they were tired of going out there and having standing water in their backyard. So we got them this bald cypress tree, which is a species that grows really well in areas that have really wet soils, and actually helps to absorb a lot of that water and prevent that flooding from happening. And then finally, involvement. So this can come in a lot of different ways. This example here is from a volunteer tree planting that we had through one of those community tree planting events. Just had folks from the community come out and help us with planting the trees. But it can be through classes on trees. It can be through really a whole bunch of different avenues, but just getting folks involved with trees is the more you get involved with something, the more like you are to care about it and remember to care for it. And so that's a really important step in maintaining any tree canopy in a city or outside the city even. So I think I went over a little bit, sorry, I get carried away sometimes talking about this, but that is the end of my presentation. So we have some guiding questions here for your breakout sessions. As Katie mentioned earlier, feel free to talk about other topics, but these are ones just to kind of guide you. So thinking about, does your organization have any sort of tree planting goal for this year or for future years? Thinking about what are some native tree species that might be in your area. And then thinking about if there are areas within your city or organization, neighborhood, whatever, that would actually be really ideal for tree planting. It could even be in your yard. You have an area that floods a lot that you need to plant a tree in. So just some things to think about.